So today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at President Washington. We're going to look at some of his stuff leading up to the presidency. But this is definitely one of those presidents you need to know in American history. He is always in the top 10 on best presidents. And pretty much what most of our presidents think is, what would Washington do? You know, what would Washington do if he was in the same position? So he is a man who cast a huge shadow, and every president after him has to fill that shadow, or attempt to. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Washington before the presidency. Washington is, a plantation man's son, and then the French and Indian War breaks out. He fights in the French and Indian War, so he's got his military kind of training. Then when the American Revolution breaks out, Washington is picked by the Second Continental Congress to serve as our commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. He does a pretty good job, because, we win. He is not the greatest in the beginning, but, he gets his legs under him and everything is great after, okay? So he proves he's a really great strategist at Trenton. Remember, Trenton is the one where he crosses the Delaware in the middle of the night, and he attacks in the early morning hours the Hessians who have been partying a little too much. So he actually gets a pretty important win there, and we needed a win because it didn't look like we were going to win. And then he actually gets us the final victory at the Battle of Yorktown. He's on the land. Our French allies are out there in the ocean, and Lord General Cornwallis, who's British, is kind of sandwiched in between. And so Lord General Cornwallis goes ahead and surrenders. He doesn't do it himself. He has a lackey do it. And the war is over. Washington, like any good general, goes home. And he goes home to his plantation, Mount Vernon. Washington very much is a history kind of buff. He studied the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic, and this is how he kind of sees things as he was a citizen soldier. His country needed him to fight. He fought. Now it's time to return back to the farmland. So he does it. He does it at Mount Vernon. He is not financially the greatest. He's a little unstable. But one thing to give him credit for is he expands his home. He expands Mount Vernon. Now, with the expansion, of course, comes slaves, because he is a plantation owner, so that's not good. But 6,500 acres of land is what he's going to own as his plantation. This is what I've been telling you guys. These plantations are huge. You're talking about a large industrial farm, but they don't have machines like we do today. What they have is slaves, and so he has well over 100 slaves. So he is a large land-owning Virginian who has tons of slaves who do all the work. Now, know that, because that's going to be his mindset, okay? He is a land-owning white male. He can vote. And so once we have the war over and we have these new articles who are really governing our country, the Articles of Confederation, the Continental Congress is the one who's actually making all the laws. And remember, that's the only branch of the government. They have a legislative branch. They don't have an executive and they don't have a judicial. They've been making all these nice laws, and everybody's, kind of going about their state's business. And then appearing on the scene is Daniel Shea. And he does his rebellion. He's upset with taxes. He says that they're unfair. And so he leads a rebellion. And the states really can't put it down. There's no military under the Articles of Confederation. They don't have a peacetime army. So you don't always have guys who are trained and ready to go and respond to a emergency situation. So Washington, as a former military guy, doesn't like that. And so when Virginia asked him to go to this convention that is meant to fix the Articles of Confederation, he agrees to do it. This is something that Washington, you're going to find, is kind of a constant in his life. They asked him to do something, and he goes ahead and he says yes. He doesn't know the word no, so he goes ahead and he serves as a delegate for Virginia at the Constitutional Convention. He's not really a politician, but he understands that he and his experience are going to be needed. He also wants to ensure that we have a military that will be a standing military. He doesn't want a huge one. He just wants something in case something happens. Why at the Constitutional Convention, Washington is going to serve as the president of the convention. He is unanimously voted in. This is going to be the same thing what happens as president of the United States. Like, people generally liked Washington. And so as the president of the convention, he is going to give his opinion here and there. He's going to vote here and there when he needs to. But Washington's presence is enough to give this meeting dignity and to give it legitimacy. Their job is to fix the articles. Why in Philadelphia they decide that there is no fixing the articles, that it is just one big waste of paper. And so they need to ball it up, throw it in the trash can, and create a brand new government. So Washington serves at the Constitutional Convention, and as he serves, he advocates, he speaks up, he supports a strong central government. He wants a government that can enforce its rules. So if you do a tax, then it should be able to enforce the tax. Remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government or the central government had to ask permission for taxes. And remember, if you ask somebody for money, they're probably going to tell you no. And so he believes that a strong central government is needed, and he believes that we need to have a military. So while at the Constitutional Convention, he pretty much exerts his influence on those things. While at the convention, there is two debates that go on. You got the Federalists and you have the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists are going to be led by Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton. And he is going to be all about a strong central government. And Hamilton is really styling the government after Britain. Some people say, whoa, hold up. Didn't we just fight Britain because we didn't agree with their government and their government's rules and policies? And those people are called the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists will be led by some Southerners, some strong states' rights people. So you're going to have Sam Adams, you're going to have Patrick Henry, and you're going to have Thomas Jefferson behind the scene. He is not actually at these meetings, but he's writing letters and giving his opinion that way. So at the meeting, they decide that the Anti-Federalists are never going to cave in, that they're never going to sign the U.S. Constitution unless they get some sort of extra insurance policy that they know that their rights are not going to be completely taken away by this brand new, strong U.S. constitutional government. So the Federalists agree to add the Bill of Rights as soon as the Constitution is ratified and as soon as the new guy, the president, takes the office. And so this is how you get the Constitution ratified. It was an agreement between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists said, okay, you give us our Bill of Rights, which is very much similar to those English Bill of Rights that we talked about previously. And we'll go ahead and we'll approve your little constitutional amendments right now. We'll approve your Constitution right now. And so everybody does what they say they're going to do, and then Washington becomes our first president. So important facts about President Washington. The Electoral College unanimously voted Washington in as president twice. So here's the election in 1792. He gets all 100% of the electoral votes. So that in 1789, everybody votes for him. In 1792, they all vote for him again. He is the first and only president that can claim this. And he has no political party. Now, as time goes on during his presidency, we will have a second party created. We're going to have the Democrat-Republicans created, and we have the Federalists. So we do have two parties created during his time. But, Washington's like, we're Americans. We just need to be Americans. We don't need to divide up in political parties. But that's not really how it's going to work in the long run. If you look, once the two-party system has actually been created, we'll see it in the election of 1796. We'll see it again in this election of 1800, or the Revolution of 1800. Here's what happens when you have political parties. When you have multiple political parties, you see more choice, you see division in the nation. So Jefferson is going to win the election of 1800 against the incumbent, or the current president, President Adams. Once Washington becomes president, there's some stuff that you kind of have to know about this guy. He is known as the precedent-setting president. pretty much he sets the tone, the example of how to be a president. So he knew he's going to be what other presidents are going to look at. They're going to ask themselves, what would Washington do? So he is very conscientious of every decision he makes. He is very careful. So, example, he accepts a salary. It's $25,000. But the reason why he accepts the salary is to ensure that wealthy people just don't get the offices. This is actually why we pay government officials here in the United States. We pay them so that anybody can get into the office. Because if you say to someone, you got to work for 4 years without a paycheck, there are a lot of Americans that are going to be eliminated from that job right then and there. So he accepts the paycheck. It's not that he doesn't need the money. He needs the money. He just feels like, you know, this is your job. You're kind of supposed to serve your nation when they call you up. But he does accept it so that the next guy can accept it and the next guy can accept it. And we don't have just rich people in our presidency. He only serves 2 terms. He serves 8 years. He could have been president forever. Okay, I mean, clearly, he gets 100% approval every single time he runs. So he could have run for a 3rd term, but he steps down. He shows transition of power and how to do it right. That after 8 years of leadership, you need to have somebody else coming in with their thoughts, with what they think, what their agenda is. You got to allow differences to happen. He expands the executive branch. He adds the cabinet. The cabinet's advisors to the president. That's his executive branch. He also expands the federal government by going ahead and establishing a national bank. He is going to follow Hamilton's advice on that. We're going to go into that a little bit more in the second video. He expands federal government as well. He expands the courts. He creates the federal court system. He gives it the structure. So he signs it in the law. Remember, the President of the United States signs bills in the law. He signs those bills that have been given to him by Congress. And we love Washington so much that we built him a monument. It's lit every night. Some things that you need to know once he gets in office, because we had that little tiff at the Constitutional Convention between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. As soon as he gets into the office of the presidency, he gets the Bill of Rights put before him. He signs the Bill of Rights in the law. It's the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. He is the only president in American history that has signed this many changes, this many amendments to the United States Constitution. Other ones have done some big ones, but this is the biggest change to our nation at one time at the Bill of Rights. So we've had plenty of amendments added since the Bill of Rights. We're up to 27, but when you look at most amendments, they're not passed as huge groups. You know, you got the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. You have the Progressive Amendments. The Progressive Amendments will be the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendments. And then you kind of just have them kind of trickling in there after. But he's the only president that signs this many into law at one given time. Now, why he is on, the job in the first couple of days, he realizes he needs help. He needs help because he is not an expert at everything. No one is. So he goes ahead and he creates a cabinet. So this is a group of advisors to the president. And his first Secretary of State is Thomas Jefferson. He is going to deal with foreign affairs and foreign policy. Washington's a former general. When he's dealing with someone, if he doesn't like it, he makes an order or he goes to war. So he needs somebody who can actually negotiate with foreign countries, and who better than Jefferson? Then he needs a Secretary of Treasury. He needs a financial genius. Our country is kind of not doing well financially. You better get a genius in there, and he gets Hamilton. Then he gets the Secretary of War, John Knox. We don't have a Secretary of War anymore. We have Secretary of Defense. But you see where Washington is actually smart. He says, I'm not smart at everything. I better get some help. So he creates a cabinet that's going to do that for him. They will advise him throughout his terms as president.